All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome. We're so grateful that you could make it to this panel today. This is the future of second chance bills in PA. So hopefully you're in the right place. Thank you to our legislators for taking the time to be here. And just so everyone knows, this panel is being co-moderated by Amistad Law Project and FAMM. And I'm Roxanne Harrell from Straight Ahead. But we also have Sean Damon and Chris Henderson from Amistad Law Project and Maria Goldner from FAMM. So we also, I will, allow the legislators to introduce themselves. And if you can introduce yourselves and tell us briefly why you became interested in introducing second chance legislation and what exactly, I guess, the bills that you're working on do. And we can start with Senator Bartolotta, if that's all right.
Certainly. Just gonna unmute myself. Yeah, I'll just rattle them through pretty quickly because we do have a fairly large body of work that we're doing in my office. I created the first ever Criminal Justice Reform Caucus at the end of 2018 with Senator Art Haywood as my co-chair in the Senate. And then the House started theirs with House Representative Delosier and Harris. So we were really focused on changing the way we do things in Pennsylvania when it comes to criminal justice reform, and in particular, second chances of getting people back to their lives, their livelihoods, and their families. Some of the bills that I've been working on are together again with Senator Haywood, the votes by Board of Pardons, and it's still in Senate Judiciary, and that would change the makeup of the board for clemency for those who are serving a life sentence. Instead of unanimous 5-0, it would be a 4-1. And again, that's still in judiciary. It went from a majority to a unanimous back when there was a horrific incident occurred when someone was given clemency, and it was a knee-jerk reaction, I think way too far in the other direction. So we're working on that. I'm working with Senator Baker and Senator Williams on probation reform. Right now it's sitting in the House Judiciary Committee. And I think that is something that will change the lives of so many people. As too many people know, probation really becomes a revolving door of incarceration. And we are constantly kicking people back into incarceration when they have a technical violation of their probation. We need to change that. We're working on that now. There's let's see, there's one that I'm passionate about right now that we're trying to get through committee, and that would be to eliminate the imposition of a DUI if someone is stopped in their vehicle and they happen just to have a medicinal cannabis card. Whether or not they're impaired right now, there's that problem with the statute. We have to change that so that people don't get an automatic DUI just simply for having a prescription for medicinal cannabis. And there are others, we could go on and on, but I'm going to leave it up to some others to tell their story. And again, I'm just very passionate about it. I'm also a member of the Pennsylvania Prison Society. So, and that's what the pin's all about. So I'm very passionate about these issues. And thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. And I will pass it to Senator Street to introduce himself, and also to just talk about briefly about the second chance bills that he has championed in the Senate, SB 135 and 835.
No, how's everybody doing today? Sorry, I'm in the sun's an odd spot at this moment, but I'm in the car moving as frequently happens. HB 135 and 835 are designed to give a chance for folks to come home who are doing life without the possibility of parole. 130. The first issue is geriatric parole, and the issue is very, very plainly, I believe that the bill would provide that people who are 55 and over would be eligible and have over 25 years of incarceral time, or would have an opportunity to go before the board of probation and parole and seek seek to be released on parole. The Department of Corrections actually stated that that 50 years old is an appropriate age. But to make the bill more palatable to some of my colleagues, we went with age 55. And so if a person were, but it's 55, assuming you've had 25 years of service, as many of time served rather. As many of you know, people age differently in prison. And so a person who's been in jail, who's 55 years old and been in jail for 25 years, has spent the years between 30 and 55 in jail. And those folks people who have been in prison tend to start having the kind of severe medical issues that people who are out of jail have at a much older age. And there are a few reasons that this is significant. One, people over 50 who serve 25 years in jail are statistically less likely to commit a serious crime than the general public. The second issue is it is extremely expensive for the Department of Corrections to house people once they start having advanced medical conditions, given all the medical services that need to be provided. And then finally, there is a redemptive effect for communities when longtime ex-offenders are able to come home and be reunited with their families. And we found, in fact, with some of the juvenile lifers, as they've returned home, they've actually spoken up and helped reduce the serious crimes. They've talked to young people, they've created programs, many of them. And so there can be some really positive effects on the community. The second bill would address, would set a standard for when people are able to come home if they've committed specifically first or second degree murder, setting at the time of, I believe, 35 years, after 35 years for first degree and 25 years for second degree. And there's probably been more resistance in the legislature on this bill, but if we were to pass the geriatric parole bill, then everyone over 55 would be eligible for parole, regardless of the nature of the offense. And so that's probably a more palatable way to get this done. We've been working on the first version longer, but I think there's probably more support for the second version. But the basic facts that despite what people may think about people who've committed first degree murder, and there are some folks that say those folks that life means life in Pennsylvania should remain that way. But in fact, there are a number of instances when you start boring into it where people do become sympathetic. When you look at the fact that there was a period of time where Pennsylvania did not have a battered spouse defense, and there are women who are still incarcerated for a first degree murder conviction solely for killing their abusers. It's unclear if today they would have been even convicted at all, and certainly wouldn't have been convicted in a way that they could never come home. In the second degree murder, we have people who are serving life without the possibility of parole, some of whom were not even present when the gun was fired that took the life of the person who died. In Pennsylvania, felony murder means that the person died while you were in the process of committing a felony. And so the classic example are a group of people say they're going to, a group of young people, because these crimes are often committed by young people, say they're going to rob a store. And two people go in, and the idea is they're going to rob the store. No one's supposed to be hurt. The other person is sitting in the car, and the guy who goes in the store pulls out a gun, and the storekeeper and he get into a scuffle, and he then shoots and kills the storekeeper. He's out in the car, they drive away. When captured, he's charged with first degree murder, but because there was a scuffle occurred, and the concept of provocation exists in Pennsylvania, which doesn't say that the murder was justified, but it says if in the process of committing a crime, you end up defending yourself. It drops from murder 1 to murder 3, which means after 25 years, in many cases, those folks actually are eligible. And in some cases, the Philadelphia Inquirer, where those folks were actually home. When the person who drove the getaway car was convicted of second degree murder in one instance, who was still 40 years in, 15 years longer than the person that pulled the trigger, and still had no possibility of parole. And so given the only remedy for these folks would be commutation, and the commutation process is long and arduous, and it's not a viable option because the Department of Pardons understands, and there are too many people involved, and it requires a unanimous vote. And so we believe this is a better option. One of the things we've emphasized is that it does not automatically release people. There still would have to be probation and parole hearings, but that these hearings provide an opportunity for people who have, in many cases, turned their lives around. Some of these folks are model citizens, many of whom the Department of Corrections has said the department believes these folks should be returned home. And so those are the 2 bills that you talked about, and I think that's a brief synopsis.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Street, and thank you for all that helpful information as well. And just so everyone knows, all the panelists knows, there's a lot of family members of currently incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people in the audience tonight, and they're, this is an opportunity for them to hear from you. And so again, just to thank you for being here. And I'm gonna pass it to Rep. Kinsey to introduce himself and to just say briefly what got him interested in introducing this legislation. His bill is identical to Street's 835, so he doesn't necessarily need to go into depth about that, but I'm going to pass it to Rep. Kinsey.
Good evening, everyone. And Roxanne, I appreciate that. And you're right. With the brief comments that Senator Street just offered, there's really no need for me to speak on my bill. But I do want to say this, though. The bill is identical to what Senator Street has offered in the Senate. And just to make folks aware, there is the House and there's the Senate. And sometimes we do what we call identical bills because if it does not, if there isn't a better opportunity for it to run in one chamber versus the other, then that's part of the ideal and the mindset behind introducing identical bills. So in Senator Street's case, his bill, which is Senate Bill 835, is of course in the Senate. My bill, which is House Bill 2347, is currently in the House. And hopefully, whichever chamber runs it first, we can just offer support cross chambers to try to help get it over the finish line. And I just want to say that I do represent parts of the city of Philadelphia, northwest section of Philadelphia. That's Germantown, Westwood Lane, Alany, and Logan. And Roxanne, I think I did you ask the question as to why I got interested in doing this? Or
yes.
So very briefly, folks, I've been in the legislature for the past 10 years. And when I first got elected, there was a gentleman, Representative Ron Waters, who came to me and simply said, "Hey man, I seen your bulls in jail. You got to go visit your bulls, your friends." And what he meant by that was that there were folks from my neighborhood. I grew up at a time when gang war was pretty rampant in the city of Philadelphia. And, as I went away to college, I came back and didn't see a lot of the folks that I grew up with. And lo and behold, unbeknownst to me, a lot of them simply ended up in jail. So as a legislator, I had the opportunity to go visiting folks. And as the conversations took place and took hold about what was taking place and trying to get, brothers and sisters out of there, this piece of legislation started to develop. It didn't look like this initially, but the idea was there, talking back and forth to those who were incarcerated. And that's really what sparked my interest in regards to recognizing that we need to do something. And I was in a position as a legislator to try to make that change. So again, I want to say thank you for allowing me to be a part of this conversation. And I look to engage in further conversation as this go on. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Rep. Kinsey. So now I'm going to pass it to Rep. Jones to talk about, introduce himself and to just talk about a bit why he was interested in working on geriatric parole legislation and to talk about the bill that he's working on as well. So Rep. Jones, I'm going to pass it to you.
Thank you, Roxanne. Appreciate you having me. This is very much a bipartisan effort. So I'm a Republican in York County. Did not run for office, really with even criminal justice reform on my radar. About my second month in office, I joined my colleagues across the aisle. The Black Democrat Caucus held a tour of the women's prison in Muncie, and it really was eye-opening to me. So, when it comes to criminal justice reform, I tell people that American and I'm a Christian, and as a businessman, a lot of what we're doing here is bad business. Whether it's revolving doors, bringing people back into the system that we need to keep out of the system. I mean, we're desperate. We have desperate needs of workforce, and in some cases, it's just as I believe Senator Street alluded to. We've got 70, 80-year-old individuals who have long since aged out of crime that have proven worthy of a second chance. And as an American, it's a land of opportunity and second chances. We all make mistakes. Nobody wants to be judged on the worst day of their life. And as a Christian, we're all in need of redemption. And I might not have done anything to land myself in prison, but I've certainly made mistakes. And I think there's a lot to be said for forgiveness and redemption if we really are going to heal. And you hear that from a lot of the victims advocacy groups. So I have a bill, Dignity for Incarcerated Women, which I won't spend much time on, but I want to get it on your radar screen because we're very close to hopefully getting that across the goal line. We have broad-based support from the wardens to the Department of Corrections to the American Conservative Union to Dream Corps Justice, and we just got the corrections officers to at least get to neutral. So that has to do with making sure we treat our mothers and sisters and daughters with dignity while they're incarcerated. I have working on a geriatric parole bill very similar to Senator Street and Rep. Kinsey, so I won't elaborate on that too much. There's a little devil in the details, whether we do second degree, first degree, second and first as an accomplice. There are some legal challenges there as well, so I agree that it's better that we do it through the parole process than the pardons process. And lastly, where we actually see some support from the district attorneys, which, keep in mind, we've got to get these bills passed. And I would throw out that we have to be very careful to not let better be the victim of best. And if we think we're going to get everything at the first pass, we're probably going to end up getting nothing. So we've got to do some bills that can at least get us moving in the right direction. And one example of that would be to eliminate life without parole for second degree, or at least give the judges and juries an option that it not be, get rid of the mandatory life without parole. But we definitely want to look retroactive to those people currently incarcerated who are worthy of second chance. And as I said, I think that's good business. I think it's consistent with American values and certainly my values as a Christian. So that's what motivates me.
Thank you, Rep.
Can I pop in for just a second?
Sure.
Representative Jones, I have the Dignity for Incarcerated Women bill in the Senate, and I was working on it with Morgan Cephas over there, but I'm not sure where that went. Did you pick that up from Morgan or? Yeah,
we've done a lot of work on it since then. You and I should probably get together. We went from having the wardens, for example, opposing it to joining us on the Capitol steps and supporting it. And it's been a lot of legwork on it, but it's just about ready to go, Senator. And I'd be happy to update you on that.
That's me.
Right.
Great. Thank you.
Also working with Morgan Cephas here as well.
All right.
Love her. Thanks.
Rep. Kail, yes, thank you for your patience and thank you for being here. And can you introduce yourself and tell us, I guess, briefly about your medical parole bill and why you're interested in introducing that legislation?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about my bill. And I do want to say thank you to the other legislators that are on this panel, because they have been working on these issues longer than I have. And in many ways, Senator Bartolotta, Senator Street, Representative Jones, Representative Kinsey have been the leaders in this, in both the House and the Senate, and their leadership ought to be commended. I'm Representative Josh Kail. My district is on the western side of the state. I border Ohio and West Virginia and Beaver and Washington counties. I have a family of, I have 7 children. My wife and I have 7 children. And I got into politics and ran for office because I wanted to see a Pennsylvania that was better. And so when I came to Harrisburg, one of the things that we looked at are areas where the system is deficient. And you could look at the education system and what's happening there and how we need to reform that. But one of the major areas that I found was extraordinarily deficient was the criminal justice system. And I don't accept that our job as legislators is to pad the status quo. And far too often, I think we get caught up in doing that because it's the easy thing. But the criminal justice system, I think from start to finish needs to be looked at. I believe that we need to ensure that people are treated with dignity. And most importantly, I think, and it's been alluded to a number of times here, but I think it's important to repeat, is that we need to start looking at how we're doing this in an overall macro sense, because the idea that people are getting out of prison and then going right back in is just really not how the system should work, and it's not how we should strive for it to work, and it's just not working the way it is now. So I'm excited about these issues. I think the reason, again, that I'm excited about it, because I believe every human being has dignity. I believe that we're all made in the image of God, and that creates in us a reason for us to have value. And whether you're in prison or whether you're a victim or whether you're somebody that's a legislator or someone that's an advocate, we all have human dignity and have value, and we should be treated with such. So my bill, quite simply and very quickly, allows for an individual who's terminally ill to leave the prison system and be cared for at home. Obviously, it goes towards the dignity piece, but it also has an effect that our prison system is not equipped to handle these types of situations. And we want people to be obviously in a comfortable situation, but we also want to make sure that our system is being run in the best way possible. Secondly, it also allows for an individual to be reunited with their family if there's a family hardship at home. A spouse dies, a child's going to enter into the foster system, things of that nature. And I'm excited about pursuing these two small pieces of criminal justice reform that matter a lot to lots of families. But it's just one step that I think we need to keep pushing with these issues. So thank you very much for having me and giving me the opportunity to talk about these bills.
Thank you, Rep. Kail. So right now we're actually going to have a question from a family member, Marcy, and she's going to just ask a general question to all of you. So I'm going to pass it to Marcy.
That's cool. Not anymore.
I think you're muted, Marcy.
I'm sorry. Hi, my name is Marcy Mara, and I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. I have a brother incarcerated for a life sentence, first-degree murder. He's on his 35th year of incarceration, and early on in his sentence, he's taken full responsibility for his crime. He went back to college, received a degree in business accounting, graduating with a 4.0 average. He's earned over hundreds of certificates throughout the years. The Pennsylvania Prison Society in 2006 honored him with the Prison of the Year award for his commitment to be a positive influence for all those that are around him. And Richie served well in this community. He's been a tutor, a volunteer. He's worked the past 19 years in the activities department as an audio video technician, hasn't been in not as much as a fight for the past 35 years. The list goes on. So my question, and I don't know if I said, he went in at 22 years old. He's 58 years old today. So in the past, I'd say 3 years, things have happened. You know, his vision went bad, his hearing's gone bad. He's got arthritis. He's got just recently went on cholesterol medication and is having a problem with the blood pressure. My question is, do you favor including all lifers for second chance legislation, including first and second degree? And why?
Again, this is a general question to the panel, so anyone who wants to jump in first can.
Well, if I may, the challenge, I think, Marcia, is it's a bit of a two-part answer, and I'm not trying to overthink it. Do I favor it? Yes. For those that, like your brother, that are deserving. And as Senator Street said, this is not setting anyone free. It's simply saying you are eligible for parole. And that's a pretty high standard. The other nice thing about going through parole instead of pardons is I think a lot of these folks would benefit from the support of the parole system. When you've been incarcerated that long, particularly some, unlike your brother, but some don't have the family support and so forth. And lastly, it helps us to sell the bill because two other quick points. If they have a technical violation, they're held to a higher standard when they're on parole, a violation that might not land, those of us, here in jail may put them right back in jail. And we have a legal challenge as well, because we as the legislature, and I'm not an attorney, Rep. Kail is, and there's probably others here, keep in mind, we are trying to reach in and to some extent undo what the court system did. There's a legitimate legal challenge we face here when we do retroactive. And one of our arguments is, Maria Golner could certainly address this, but in a sense, they still have a life sentence. It's just being served outside of the prison, if you will, under the auspices of parole, if that makes sense. So it gives us a legal argument for court challenges. With that said, my current thinking is that we would start with second degree or possibly first degree accomplices. That gets a little trickier to define than you might think. That's probably not what you want to hear in the case of your brother, but the concern is we have gotten, it depends, not from everybody. Victims groups, for example, are pretty understanding, but when you talk about DAs whose support we're going to need and other legislators whose votes we're going to need, we've heard a couple of things. They don't think 55 sounds like geriatric, so there is a psychology to 60. And we get pushback really even on both sides of the aisle when you talk about first degree versus second. That may not be fair and may not be what you want to hear, but I'm somewhat inclined to start with second, at least move the needle and get through some of what we expect would be some legal challenges. So that's where we're kind of at. My perspective.
I'll chime in. I know that someone that I know very well was a juvenile lifer, and he was, because of Miller versus Alabama, he was given the opportunity to have another hearing. And the judge, thankfully, God bless her, because he was incarcerated at 17 years old and he was in for 24 years, not one write-up for anything in 24 years. That's remarkable. And the judge said, you know what, I'm going to give you a second chance. And he's been a stellar citizen since then. However, he's still, for a length of time, had the ankle bracelet, had report, he was still under pretty strict supervision, even though he was given a pardon. So there are still some steps that the court imposes on people, even through a pardons process. So I'm not sure exactly what if it's the same for each case, I don't know, but I think that, for sure, they definitely do the halfway house and they get the services that they need. And we must ensure that these people get the services, because 95% of people incarcerated are going to get out at some time. You can't just open the door and say, there you go, get your life back. That's impossible. And it's a setup for sure failure. So we must be sure in all of our work that we're providing the necessary wraparound services for these folks before they get out. Make sure they've got their Medicaid, make sure they have a place to go, make sure they have therapy, make sure they've got the, some sort of, recovery program, whatever the case may be. We have to be sure that we set them up for success, or they're really doomed for failure. So I do know that there is some length of supervision, even with a pardon process.
Yeah, yes, and that is true. And to your point, as far as the juvenile lifers, Senator Bartolotta, there have been numerous, and I'm sorry, I don't have the percentage
Mhm.
of those juvenile lifers that were first degree cases.
Yeah.
And they came home and they're doing wonderful things. I know them today,
Yeah.
you know, like so many other men and women who have served 30 plus, 20 plus years.
Sure.
You know, they went in for their crime and it may have been horrible but they've turned their lives around, and like, you can't fake this. You know,
Yeah.
when you go without a write-up for 20 and 30 and 40 years, you can't fake that, especially in a criminal justice system, in that kind of environment. You know, these men and women that we speak of are men and women who are mentors. They're involved with programming, and, you know, they give back so much to the community.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
yeah, and so,
Yeah.
you know, and as far as Representative Jones, you know, there are second degree, it could be so confusing because there are second degree cases that should have been first degree cases, and first degree cases that should have been second degree cases, and more so than what I think we all really realize.
You're correct about that, and I'm not the one we're trying to convince. I'm in agreement with you, but I'm just telling you there is, I've been working on this for many months with a lot of different people, and it doesn't make me an expert. I'm sure Senator Bartolotta, and I know Maria and various others have probably forgotten more than I've known, but I have learned a lot. And I was just trying to give you an honest answer. What I support, yes, I think everything you just said is valid. I'm just letting you know that I think, again, sometimes if you try to get everything you want, you get nothing. And we have to at least move the needle. And I'm simply saying that with some of the groups whose support is going to be fairly important, there is definitely pushback on first degree. And you recognizing what you said, it's not, no one's saying it's fair, but there is a psychology to it. So we're trying to chip away. And I think, you know, again, an accomplice, there's, you know, is one way to chip even further. You know, they might have been first degree, but they were, you know, the accomplice, not the mastermind or the trigger person or whatnot. So you know, it's a little devil in the details. We certainly have the same shared goal. It's just a matter of how best to get there.
Marcia,
Thank you, Senator Jones. And you should be meeting Richie pretty soon because he's at Chester. He's one of the presenters.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. We've had to reschedule a couple times, but
Yeah,
we're excited to get over there and meet him and the others.
I'm going to be there on May 5th for their the new Scandinavian reopening. So I'll make sure that I go say hi to him. I saw him there the last time I was there.
Yeah, he's part of the Scandinavian.
Yeah, I know. I met him there.
Yeah. I will
Marcia,
look forward to seeing you.
Marcia, this is Rep. Kinsey, and let me just say something. I appreciate the comments from my colleagues, and Representative Jones made some comments about chipping away, and I'll be honest, I believed in that process of chipping away. But what I also recognize is that, you know, talking to lifers and advocates, as I attempted to chip away, I found out that I wasn't actually chipping away at anything at all. And I'm talking about previous legislation that I had initially introduced a few years ago. And so, you know, and that chipping away, you know, you have to talk with colleagues, and Rep. Jones, you know, I was working with actually 3 colleagues on the other side of the aisle who were introduced to me. 2 were introduced to me by individuals who were lifers up at Greater at the time. And so I looked at a compromise and tried to compromise with the intent strategically that there would be some amendments added on to a bill. But the reality of it is that by negotiating and chipping away, I was still in the same place where nothing was done. And again, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, because I think that as legislators, we're all responsible. We're all culpable in regards to what we're able to do or even unable to do. But I can tell you that with the bill that I introduced, 2347, which again is a companion bill to Senator Street, I don't want to say did a full reversal, but it's sort of like done away with the chipping away and simply saying, like, let's just go and try to knock this out the box. Now, whether it's going to get anywhere or not, I don't know. But what I do know is that I was convinced by talking to advocates, by talking to individuals who are incarcerated, by talking to family members that, you know, like, just go for the whole thing and let's all work together to try to get something done. So there are different ideas, different strategies that are applied. I don't know which one is the best strategy, but I know if we don't try anything at all, then we're not going to get nothing at all. But if we try something, if we shoot for 100% and we fall at 99.9, you know, then that's 99.9% of the folks that we were able to assist and help. So, you know, again, I just want to share a different strategy, and I agree with Representative Jones. We have to find a way to work together, but part of it is making sure that we're all educated too. And, you know, there's different pockets and different understandings and different personal beliefs. But guess what? You know, for me, talking to the advocates, talking to the family members, it took me from one point to another point to another point. And so that's why I can easily say to you right here, right now, that yes, you know, when you talk about first and second degrees and the legislation that mirrors Senator Street's includes those individuals as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, Rep. Kail. Go ahead.
I can't, and I'll be very brief. I agree with what Rep. Kinsey just said, and I can't stress enough how important it is for us being legislatures to be educated on these issues. And this state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, is a remarkably diverse state. There is different subcultures and different places all over the place. Within our own caucus on the Republican side, within the Democratic caucus, there's different factions, and you know, there's 203 members. And the most important thing that we can be doing is educating members. And I got to tell you, the personal stories and the real life stories is the hands down most effective way to educate people. And what you guys are doing is very important. And I know that you are not going to, I know you're not going to, you know, get everything all at once. And in Pennsylvania, incrementalism is revolutionary because we don't seem to be the quickest moving legislature in the nation. And, but this is how you do it. You share your story, you convince people one at a time. And Camera made mention, I didn't mean to leave out the House of Lords, Senator Bartolotta. There's also 50 senators, so it's 253 legislatures. Yeah, but it's just, it is a very granular process, and it's something that nothing moves without interactions like this. And what you're doing is absolutely essential for the future of criminal justice reform. So I just want to encourage you to keep up the great work.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you, Marcy, and thank you, senators and representatives, for your answers. I'm going to pass it to Maria to ask a question.
Hey, so good evening. I'm Maria. I'm the Pennsylvania State Policy Director for FAMM. I just wanted to talk briefly about the process of a bill becoming a law, because I get questions, and I know everyone on here gets questions and has questions all the time about when are these bills going to be passed that we're talking about tonight. You know, we saw something online on social media, on the internet. When is it actually going to happen? And so I just want to take a moment and talk about the process by which a bill becomes a law. It's been referenced. It's very slow on purpose. And I'm going to put an explainer from the legislature in the chat right now, that if you look at the chart that's in there, you know, there's squiggly lines going in every direction, and it'll make your brain hurt. And basically what has to happen is, you know, these lawmakers have worked on these concepts. Other lawmakers do the same thing about any concept under the sun, whether it's school funding, criminal justice reform, casinos, street paving, naming a bridge, whatever it is. There's an idea, there's a concept, there's talk, there's research. And then after that can take a while, you know, that can take a while just to really try to understand the size and shape of the issue. And then the lawmaker sits down and writes the text of the bill, right? And they may do that themselves. They may do that with help from groups like are on this call. They may do that with help from their own staff attorneys or, you know, lobbyists. They can do that in a whole number of ways. Then they go ahead and introduce the bill, and that's when you see it gets assigned a bill number. We have a link to share on the legislative website. And from that point, they try to gather co-sponsors and say, okay, who else in the legislature will sign on to this with me? So we see a lot in the Senate that Senator Bartolotta is one of the few, not the only, but one of the few Republicans who signs on to reform bills in the Senate and is willing and happy to co-sponsor meaningful bills. So you try to gather support and see if you can make it bipartisan, get as many people as you can. And then it has to go, this is just the beginning, then it has to go through a committee. So all the bills that we're talking about tonight are going to go through a Judiciary Committee. There's one in the House, one in the Senate. That has its own leadership. That has its own priorities. There are also lots of things going on behind the scenes, much of which we will never know about, right? Deals being made, negotiations of, help me with this, I'll work on that. Obviously, a lot of principles, a lot of personalities, a lot of politics that go into that. So things can kind of sit in committee. As many of you know, we've seen some questions about that in the chat. We're going to get to that in a little bit. They can sit in committee, or if there is political will, and this is the key, there has to be political will for it to move, and the leadership has to agree to move the bill, then it can get voted on in committee. And if it gets enough votes, it will go to the floor, which just means it will go to that main big chamber in the legislature of the House or Senate, where all of the members will vote on it. If you can make it through all those steps, you're still not done. You have to do the exact same thing with the committee and the floor votes in the other chamber. So we've done all of that in the House, or we've done all of that in the Senate. Now you're going to flip flop. You're going to go to the other one. You're going to have to try to do it again, start over with totally different people, totally different politics, totally different priorities. Do that all again. Again, this is designed to be difficult. It is designed to be hard to change the law on the idea that the founders, thought that society shouldn't be able to make laws quickly, and thinking that they didn't want it to be like a roller coaster. So then let's say you make it through both of those. Amazing. You've made it through all the steps I've outlined. You still actually have to be signed by the governor. So if you have a governor who is not sympathetic or not interested in this, they just veto it, you're done after you did all of that. And also I want to flag that some of these things, most of what we're talking about is straight legislative. So it's going to go through the process I just said. But some of them, like Senator Bartolotta's clemency reform, and Leader McClinton in the House has one too, to make it a 3-2 vote. Those actually have to change the Constitution. So they're going to have to go through that entire process I just outlined twice, not just once. And then they're going to have a constitutional referendum. So you don't need to worry about that. Just remember, for clemency, it is in the Constitution. It's this longer process. For most of everything else we're discussing, it is legislative. It's going to be the first really long process that I outlined, but without having to go to a vote in the state. So I think that's everything I wanted to highlight on that. I do want to go around and kind of rapid fire with the lawmakers, just a quick answer, and then we're going to have a follow-up question, but let's go around really quick. And for your specific bill, tell us what you think is a realistic time frame for passage very quickly. And we're not gonna, we know that you don't have a crystal ball. We know there's a lot that goes into this, but just to give our families who have loved ones in prison right now some idea, what do you think is a realistic time frame for passage? 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? What are we talking about? And let's start with Rep. Kinsey, just because I see him first.
Sure, I'm going to tell you that at least 4 years, at least.
Rep. Jones.
Dignity has a chance this year. The geriatric is at least 3 years. And if I can quickly add, one other thing you have to remember is the whole process Maria just described. If we don't get it done in 2 years, the clock starts all over again, because we have elections every 2 years. So it's a tight time, but I would say, yeah, so it's challenging.
So he's saying, like this year, there's an election. We're going to have a different governor next year. Nobody on this call has any idea who that's going to be. Literally none. If you do, let us know. But that could totally change the landscape. Totally new people. Hopefully all these lawmakers will come back and continue to work with us, but we could have to start from scratch with someone who's never been to a prison or knows anything about it. Thank you. Thank you both. I'm going to turn to Senator Bartolotta. Time frame for passage.
Okay, well, I mean, there's so many out there in the hopper, and as Representative Jones said, he's got the companion bill out there, and hopefully we can just race to the finish for dignity for incarcerated women. Also, the probation reform bill, I think that is absolutely vital. It's over in the House right now, and I think we just need a little bit of pressure on there because we don't want to have to start the clock all over again. And so we really haven't gotten anywhere with changing the makeup of the pardons board. I don't know that that's something that's palatable at the moment, but we are going to keep pushing and keep trying, because it was the lieutenant governor who came to me and asked me to lead a charge on that with pre-COVID. Which PC or BC, before COVID, everything starts then. So we're working on all of those things.
Thank you so much. Rep. Kail.
I think it would be considered success if we made progress in the next 3 to 5 years.
Thank you. Senator Street.
I want to say, I think we can get within 2 years, we can get some form of geriatric parole done.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you all doing that. Thank you. That's really, really helpful to us, and I think to our families. I want to turn next and go around and ask you briefly to talk about the roadblocks and challenges. I think a lot of us on this call know, the most common ones that we hear when we have meetings, when we talk to people about it, are that the district attorneys won't agree, that victims don't agree. I know Rep. Jones and I and many of you have done a lot of intentional, respectful outreach with the Office of the Victim Advocate, which does seem to be having a shift in perspective, as well as other groups. I saw in the chat, we have some amazing work going on with healing communities. So there's a lot happening there. It may be that those are the roadblocks and challenges you as lawmakers are seeing. It may be other ones that aren't those. So let's go around and please briefly answer, what do you think are the biggest roadblocks to getting these big bills passed? Rep. Jones.
Yeah, on a positive note, I've been very surprisingly encouraged by the response from the victims groups that you and I have spoken with so far. So that's a good thing. And I think the DAs aren't where we need them to be, but they're a better place than they were a year or two ago. It also helped from a Republican perspective with President Trump doing criminal justice reform. I think that made it, got people's attention on the Republican side. To me, what I found to be a big hurdle is, it's one thing, some of the people, at least on our side, aren't necessarily opposed, but it's not a priority. They're not excited about it. So it's really a challenge to get the chairman of a committee to run it if there's not, if they don't have the will to do it, and they don't have near unanimous support from their own party in the committee. And then leadership has to make it a priority. So it's not that they're really hostile to it. It's just that it's not a priority, and the clock is, ticking against you, like I said. And there's an adage in politics that nobody ever lost an election for a vote they didn't take. And as a business guy, I've been very frustrated that there's a lot of incentive to do nothing. And it's pretty irritating, quite frankly. But, it's one thing to say that somebody's okay with it. It's another thing to say they're motivated to fight for it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you. Senator Bartolotta, what are our biggest roadblocks here?
I think the biggest roadblocks is that we need to educate people. It's lack of education, because with my caucus, what we love to do with the Criminal Justice Reform Caucus is we love to bring in, even via Zoom, all kinds of different groups of people. We had the Pennsylvania Prison Society come and do an entire presentation. I had IJIS, which I'm actually meeting with them on Monday, and that is the Integrated Justice Information Systems, and we're going to try to get a pilot program. They're amazing. Look them up. If you need more information, call me. But it's just education. We need to, I did this when it came to the energy industry out here in the southwest of Pennsylvania. I brought legislators from the east, and we did tours. Come and see it with your own eyes. Come and experience it. That's what I'm advocating for. Every single person, every legislator should go to a prison. They have to go to the cafeteria, eat lunch with these inmates, look at the hospital situation, look at the yard, talk to people, communicate with them. These are human beings. These are people. They're family members, their fathers, their mothers, their sons, their daughters, and they made a horrific mistake at one point in their lives. And we do everything we can in Pennsylvania to give every crime a life sentence. And we have to stop that. Education is key. We've got to just keep pushing and pushing and just show people in the power to make difference that, these are human beings, and we can do a heck of a lot better. We can provide safer neighborhoods. We can bring people back to their families to raise their kids. We can bring people back to their jobs to add to the tax base. I don't care what hook you use, what bait you bait the hook with. It's an overarching need for reform, and just to, keep people who are decision makers right out there in the open to meet all of these people and experience it. Go to a prison, talk to people.
Thank you, Senator Bartolotta. Rep. Kinsey, biggest challenges.
I think that going back to some of the comments made earlier, I agree with Senator Bartolotta in regards to the education piece. I think that there's a big piece that's missing with that, but also I can tell you that in my opinion, the ideology, I think Senator Street referenced this a little bit earlier. I know that when we first looked at pieces of legislation and had conversation with members throughout the chamber, at least in the House, the secretary at the time mentioned if you're age 50 and you've been in prison for at least 20, 25 years, you're considered old once you get out. But unfortunately, there's still some folks who think that they hear the numbers. Oh, 50, they're still young. Or 55, they're still young. Not necessarily being aware of what's taking place behind, while they're incarcerated. So I use the ideology as well as education. But, I can tell you that when I talk to members in the House, for say, as an example, and talk about the age of 50, 55, I mean, they want to start at the age of 60 to 65. So I think that there's a miss there. And then on top of that, the committee chair, I think that Representative Jones had mentioned this. The committee chairs, they hold quite a bit of power. And, if they refuse to bring these topics up,
I think she has an idea of where he might be.
Up in committee, then it sort of hinders the process of even getting it out of the box. So those are what I believe to be the major roadblocks right now.
Thank you so much. Rep. Kail, major roadblocks.
I agree. Number one, the issue is education, right? Members need to be educated. I don't need to belabor that point. It's been made. I think something that is a major roadblock that may not be have been stated yet is the media. I think how issues are being perceived out there, how things are being projected and what's happening in Philadelphia and other big cities and this other stuff and what's being reported on, and that being tied to what we're trying to do with criminal justice reform, I think it all gets lumped together in a lot of ways. And I think that's very harmful to the cause. And I think that's an issue that we do need to deal with. There was just as an example of how this could become an issue and mixing with politics, there was a presidential candidate, Michael Dukakis, who was running, I believe, in 1988 against George H.W. Bush. And there was a situation where he was tied in with he had some connection. I'm not sure if he signed a law or order. There was a weekend release system in Massachusetts. And the way it was construed and the way it was sent out, it ended up creating a real political problem. And the perception of reform was changed and altered. And we can see that today also with the media and how things and situations are used and leveraged for other issues and other gain. I think that's something we have to be cognizant of, that both sides, on the R side, on the D side, I think we need to keep our eyes focused on the prize and really what we're trying to do, and that's improve people's lives and not get too caught up in all the what I would call media circus that we're seeing across the board in Harrisburg and DC.
Thank you very much. Senator Street, what are our biggest challenges to getting these bills passed?
Well, look, I think a lot of my colleagues have illuminated some of the biggest challenges, but I would say the single biggest challenge is what Representative Jones already said, which is that you have to have not only people you have to have people who are not merely a chair who's not merely not against it, but actually interested in moving the bill. And in a very busy calendar, what I found is the majority caucus, the Republican caucus, there are a lot of folks who are not offended by these bills, but they're just not a priority. And so they don't get moved. And so we need people to not only be okay with them, but we need people to want to prioritize them. And I think it's important that we're doing things like this in a bipartisan way, because that's really the only way we're going to get this done. And then the second part of it, that goes in hand was what was just recently alluded to, which was the Willie Horton situation, the Dukakis thing. And that created a fear amongst some people that if you are perceived to be for criminal justice reform, that there's a risk associated with it because you could in fact be characterized as being soft on crime. That being said, well, I think there's been a lot of good work done around recasting that and explaining that's not really the case. And in fact, statistically speaking, because we aren't, as legislators, the ones who will make a determination about releasing or holding someone, we're just creating a set of standards whereby the professionals at the Board of Probation and Parole or the Pardons Board or will make those decisions. And so I think we've done a good job recasting it, but probably need to do a better job making it a priority on the legislative calendar.
Thank you. And my final question, we're going to go around rapid fire again. Is there anything that you haven't mentioned already? We've heard education is probably prime. Communication, we can meet with our lawmakers. The families on here, we can look at writing letters to the editor. We can get involved with the groups that are on this call. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you think we and the families on this call can be doing to push this that hasn't been covered tonight? And I'll start with you, Rep. Jones.
I think it's been a very good discussion and comprehensive. So there's not a whole lot that comes to mind other than I think we need to talk about how this deters crime. Meaning that I use the example, let's use Marsha's brother. If he was able to get out tomorrow, which it sounds like he's deserving, he can have a discussion with an 18-year-old young man going down the wrong path that I could never have. I mean, I could have it and I'd be happy to, but I don't have any credibility with that young man in that example. I think that's something at least that I don't hear talked about a whole lot. As this isn't just compassion, it's good. It's also, if done properly, will reduce crime. And a lot of the resources that we're tying up incarcerating, 60, 70, 80-year-old individuals that are no threat to society could be used for the prosecution of those, that do deserve to be prosecuted, or be given to victims, which is a big part of what we want to work into our bill, is that this will go to victims. So I think we need to look at this as a, break. And the same thing is true with the probation reform and other things, that this really is about reducing crime and being much more strategic in how we use resources and enabling some of these folks that have turned their life around to be the mentors that certainly folks like myself and many of us just can't be, because we don't have that experience and that credibility. So I think we need to start doing that as well, especially in conservative areas like I represent and Josh represents. It's not that people are hostile to it. It's just not really on their radar. And it helps when you have conservative voices saying this is the right thing to do. And we need to do a better job messaging it, comprehensively, not just the compassionate piece.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I will just open this to the rest of the panel. Is there anything for our lawmakers that you think we should be doing that we haven't covered already tonight that you think would help?
Real fast, I do think that something Rep. Jones said I want to develop a little bit more, and that is recognize the broad and diverse coalition that you can bring together here with these issues. I mean, when you have the Americans for Prosperity and also FAMM and all these other groups, you are going to be bringing together individuals from different places for different reasons, whether it's being fiscally conservative, whether it's being socially conservative and caring about family issues, whether it's being about civil liberties or second chances. I mean, you can build a very broad, diverse coalition. And I would just say, don't be afraid to go anywhere with your message, because there's something for everybody. And keep building that coalition and bringing that coalition, because I think that's what's going to ultimately have the bring together enough people to make changes in this Commonwealth.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of both of those, both of the gentlemen. It's when I started the Criminal Justice Reform Caucus, it exploded, and it was almost like it was a joke. What does the ACLU and the Koch brothers, Newt Gingrich and Van Jones, all have in common? and that's criminal justice reform. And it's every corner of society. It's you know, African American, it's okay, it's this, it's Philly, it's Pittsburgh, it's rural, it's everything. And because of the errors that we made, especially in Pennsylvania in the 90s, lock them up, throw away the key, mandatory minimums, all of those things, we had this explosion of population of incarcerated individuals, and it's become generational because we're not giving them the tools they need to succeed on the way out. But again, it's keep the message coming and know that it is a universal topic. And, you know, take a look, and we need to know what resources are out there for so many people. And there's a long list of them. I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to that have no idea what the Pennsylvania Prison Society is, and it was founded by Benjamin Franklin. It's been around for a while. They don't know it exists. We have to have those resources, and FAMM and all of these other wonderful organizations that do such good work. We need to put that front and center in front of the faces of all of our legislators so that they know what resources they have available, who they should support, and who they should, you know, bring into the tent and support those organizations in their districts, so that can, you know, every single district across Pennsylvania should know exactly what these resources are, what they do, how to get these people into them. And we just don't know. We don't know enough of that yet.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add, I think the Senator Bartolotta sort of touched on at the end, which is this: organize. We need to organize people in districts. This is an issue. There is somebody in every district. There is a community of people that care about this issue. And because of that, unlike other issues, there is an opportunity to go into districts in all 50 Senate districts, all 203 House districts, and organize people to speak to their legislators. Legislators will respond much more strongly to people that live in the communities that they represent. And there are people in communities in every one of our districts that support this.
Yeah. And I want to say that I agree with everything that was said by my colleagues. One thing I want to add in addition to that, Maria, is that you know, we as colleagues also need to engage. I know that Senator Bartolotta has started the Criminal Justice Caucus, and we need to make sure that we support each other. You know, the legislation that I have that mirrors Senator Street, I just looked at it. There's 20 members that are signed on. They're all Democrats. You know, but yet Kail and I, we've had conversation on the floor. You know, Representative Greg Rothman, I have the bipartisan caucus, and so we should utilize every simple means to go back to educate the members, because even when I look at House Bill 2347, I know for a fact that there are folks that organizations on this call have spoken to, because some of the members, the Democratic members, have come to me and said, hey, I got a call from such and such about your bill. And, you know, that's great. I explained the bill to the members, but yet by the same token, those members are not on this bill. You know, and likewise, I need to support legislation that my colleagues from across the aisle put out, because I think that from a standpoint, when members start seeing other members from across the aisle sign on, I think it sparks even greater interest, and we call it bipartisan support. And I think if we can continue to push internally bipartisan support and get the support of the advocacy groups and the individuals and the families here, I think it sort of leads to changes being made, because it's not just one party or one chamber, but it's all of us working together in a collective fashion, pushing to ensure that there's a change. So I just want to offer that and say, you know, we can also utilize the bipartisan caucus to educate members, just to present something. We're not going to vote on it, but to present the information so it doesn't come down from our leadership and trying to get members to say yay or nay, because we want to stick together simply as a caucus.
Yep. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Rep, and all of you. And we're going to turn it to Crystal.
Hello, my name is Crystal. I'm an advocate and a loved one, and my question is for Senator Street. But I do want to thank each and every one of you for taking your time out. Both SB 135 and SB 835 were introduced last year. Can you just give us an update and explain to the audience why there hasn't been any movement?
Well, I mean, Senator Baker has not called a hearing. I mean, she hasn't been interested in holding a hearing. She has expressed interest in the bills. She has I've had good conversation with her, but she has not put it on the legislative calendar, sort of what Representative Jones was talking about. She's expressed no negative feelings about either bill. As a matter of fact, she's expressed in conversation some positive feelings to me and to advocates. But it's just not, she hasn't called it for a hearing in judiciary. And that's really the first step in, before there'll be a vote, there'd be a set of hearings, and where you all would be able to talk and members would be able to ask questions. And that has not happened. And so that would be the holdup. And like I said, I don't want to say there's been no movement, because she has been very positive in her discussions about them, but she has not called a hearing.
Thank you, Senator Street. And thank you, Crystal. Did you want to ask any follow-up?
I do want to ask a follow-up question. What can we do to get her to put it on the Judiciary Committee? I mean, the calendar. What can we as advocates, loved ones, what have you, what can we do to get that to move forward?
I think there are two things. One, people can certainly talk to her and educate her, and think people have done that. But I think as you educate other members and as you organize, and there are a greater number of members who want this to happen and see it as a priority, it's more likely to happen. And so I think this is something that can happen. But I do think we need to build a broad coalition of people who are going to her saying, this is a real priority. We'd love to have these hearings on it. And I think if we had enough members, both Republicans and Democrats, who not only said that I could consider voting for it, or this is not a bad idea, but say this is a priority to me, then I think it's likely to get a hearing. Right now, we have members, we've moved to a place where people are saying I couldn't do that, I don't understand it. This is not a bad idea. Maybe I could be there, but we need members to say this is a priority in terms of getting a hearing.
Yeah, thank you, Crystal, and thank you, Senator Street. We're actually going to pass it to another family member. Joan, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, my question is for Senator Bartolotta. My name is Joan Sale. I'm in Berks County, which is a rural farming area. My loved one is in his 45th year of incarceration. He was convicted way back in 1977 as a young 20-something for obviously a dire mistake he made. He will be 75 this year. I will be 72. I know him since he's 13 and I am 10. I'm very close to him. I'm doing everything I know how to advocate for him. My question to you is, how do we get more Republican support for these bills, which obviously in my mind are critically important? The way I hear tonight, he could be 80 years old till he gets considered for commutation. What can we do?
Well, again, to reiterate some of the points that have been raised already, there are different avenues for encouraging participation and advocacy for certain bills. Medical parole, I mean, heaven forbid we call it, compassionate release. You're not supposed to be compassionate, I guess, but medical parole, geriatric parole, it just makes sense. And if we can really hone in on what might be the trigger for some legislators, okay, if it's fiscal responsibility, and we know that someone has been incarcerated for 45 years, and if they're very, very young and they have no health problems, it's an annual expense of about between $40,000 and $42,000 per person. And there's thousands of people incarcerated. It's just astronomical. And then as they age and they need more and more health, concerns that pop up, the price goes up and up and up and up. I mean, some individuals with really severe conditions are up over $100,000 a year to keep them behind bars when they can't walk. They're no risk to anyone. And it's time that we take a very, very solid look at what it is we're doing. And, is this corrections? Is it reform, or is it just retribution at this point?
Yeah, I think it's, yes, I'm sorry. I think it's retribution. And with this fella, they literally threw the key away. They really did.
Well, back then that was the thing to do. It's like, oh, hey, you did this, you're done. So
Yeah.
finally in Pennsylvania is so far behind in so many things. I have a jar in my office that says only in Pennsylvania. When you hear that, you put $1 in. We're sending my legislative staff to Harvard. But it's just, we have to focus on what is the trigger for, what is the language someone is speaking. Sometimes that language is, look, do you want to save the taxpayers?
Right.
Literally hundreds of millions of dollars, not just in what we're spending on incarcerated individuals and the healthcare that they need, but how about the fact that they're not working, paying their taxes, supporting their kids, creating a business, any of those things. It's just such a monumental number when you add all of those factors in, that I think finally, Republicans who call themselves fiscally responsible or fiscally conservative, when you shine that bright light on that issue, that makes a big difference. So again, I think we're unwinding this horrible ball of string that was created in Pennsylvania back in the 90s. But if we keep at it, we're going to find the end, and we'll start unraveling it a little bit, but we just have to keep at it.
Yeah, I will be at it till the day I die.
Can I add something to that? I've been thinking about this the last 5 minutes here. Senator Street, Rep. Kinsey, and possibly Senator Bartolotta through your through the Criminal Justice Reform Caucus. One of the things, and I'm relatively new. Josh and I came in together. I've only been there 3 years, and again, I was never in politics. I'm a business guy, and so one of the things, and keep in mind, I'm not in leadership meetings and so forth. But here's what I'd like to get on your radar, and we can take it offline. I don't see negotiation in Harrisburg seems to be, budget centric. I don't know. It seems like it's a lot of times it just means watered down or compromise. I don't see a lot of horse trading. And one of the things, I think there are some really good, similar to the point that the senator just made, but beyond just fiscally conservative, the fiscal responsibility part, there are some really good small business bills, for example. I'm not talking controversial guns and abortion stuff. I'm talking solid tax reform that would help small and mid-sized business, like-kind exchange and things like that. Okay. I think those are bills that the Democrats and the governor, I think, should support or certainly can live with, but aren't necessarily huge priorities. Same thing with criminal justice, but our side is passionate about it. Same thing with criminal justice reform. Like we've talked a couple times here today, we can live with some of that. I think there's a great opportunity for some pro-business, common sense, pro-business bills in exchange for some common sense criminal justice reform bills. And I would love to have the opportunity, again, probably beyond my pay grade, but you as senators and Rep. Kinsey and Senator Street as Democrats, if we could facilitate some discussion with the governor, I think there's a great opportunity here to do some horse trading and get what I think would be a win-win kind of thing. So we could take that offline, but I really like that idea.
So I'm interested. So let's Senator Bartolotta and I talk frequently. Maybe we can put together a little discussion. And I was with the governor earlier today, and I do have a chance to talk with him fairly, not a whole lot, but enough that I think we could get the governor's people to the table about a reasonable set of discussions.
That would be great.
Well,
thank you.
To piggyback on that, I mean, I was appointed to the Workforce Development Board, and the president of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce, the president of the Manufacturers Association, they're all on board for rehabilitation, getting newly released folks, returning citizens back to work. We have a workforce out there in Pennsylvania where there are people who are still afraid to go to work, or they're like, no, I'm waiting for a better paying job. Or it's very hard to get people to work today in Pennsylvania. So we have this massive, population of newly returning citizens who they show up, they work hard, they're glad to be there, And, you know, this is something that we are finally starting to convince business owners that, look, this is an excellent workforce opportunity for you. Put these people back to work, give them a chance, give them a job. They're going to do a good job for you. So that's something also that we can talk about, just workforce development and training people, getting people trained before they exit incarceration, and then putting them into different programs. You know, there's a wonderful program that just started up in Aliquippa. It's a pilot program, and it's a reclaim project. They take formerly incarcerated individuals and they help demolish buildings that are blights in different neighborhoods, and they take parts of the homes and resell them and become self-sufficient. It's an incredible program. So there are things out there that are, you know, just starting or maybe happening in other states, and we need to learn more in Pennsylvania. But yeah, small business and workforce.
I just want to jump in and say, I think that Senator Bartolotta might be onto something. For a lot of business people, there are concerns about, for the lower end of the job market, that people, because the economy is so red hot, that there are people that aren't taking those jobs, and we need people in those positions. And if we were to couple this with some of the things about skill that the chambers have asked for, that around training people and workforce training, I think if we could say, look, this is an opportunity to add people to the workforce, and we can train them, and there's probably and there are some tax things, and we could probably fold in some tax incentives as well to get it done. But I do think that, you know, there really is, because there's a whole population of people who want to work, and statistically speaking are just not a risk to society. So I think, but it's more than just say they're not a risk. They could be a real benefit. And I think that's the difference. Senator Bartolotta was talking about how we don't just message that these folks are not a risk, but they are a benefit. And you're their family member. So I think that is a set of discussions that we probably should be having.
And the building trades are all about it. All about it. They're desperate for people.
I'm loving this discussion, and in the interest of time, we're going to move on. But thank you so much, Joan, for your question.
Thank you, everybody, for answering. And this is a great meeting tonight. I'm really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to pass it to Chris from Amistad Law Project right now.
Thank you, Roxanne, and thank you to the representatives and senators for your time tonight. So this question is for both Representative Jones and Representative Kail. The both of you are Republicans. You're both on the House Judiciary Committee. Can you give us a sense of where the Judiciary Committee is on the issues that we've discussed tonight, specifically and especially on medical parole?
Yeah, Rep. Jones, let me go first because you've really taken the lead on this, and I just want to let them know that you've taken the lead on it. Rep. Jones has been instrumental in educating our committee on these issues, and he's brought stakeholders in, he's brought people in to help all of us understand, including the chair, better about these issues. And that's where it currently sits right now, is that educational phase. And Rep. Jones, I'll let you take it on from there.
No, I appreciate that, Rep. Kail. Thank you. I think that's a pretty good answer right there. And just for clarification, not to nitpick, I'm not on Judiciary Committee. Rep. Kail is, but Chairman Kaufman has been gracious enough to have me come in and keep an open mind. So I think specifically the dignity bill, I put a lot of effort into getting Republican co-sponsors. We now have over half of the Republican members of the Judiciary Committee, not the entire body, but I really focused on them, including Rep. Kail. Over half the members of the Judiciary Committee, Republicans, have co-sponsored the dignity bill. We are earlier in the geriatric discussion, but I will tell you that Rep. Kaufman, Chairman Kaufman, I should say, is actually more interested in that subject, and that's a big deal. That's a big deal. He's very open to it. We're hoping to have some hearings. Representative Torren Ecker, actually through not through Judiciary, but I think through Probes, we're hoping to have some hearings in the next couple of months on the whole subject. Coming back to Senator Bartolotta's point, that the positive economic impact we can have here. So it's Chris, correct? Chris. I think we,
Yes.
all things considered, I think if you compare to where we were even a year ago, certainly a couple of years ago, we feel a lot better about the House Judiciary Committee today than we probably ever have, certainly in recent history. I hope that answers your question. Reason cautiously optimistic. How about that?
I think that does answer my question, yeah, and I hope that, you know, when those hearings are happening, that some of the folks on this call are people that you consider for that hearing.
Most
Yeah,
definitely.
thank you.
Yeah. So we have about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to maybe ask a couple audience questions. I know Elaine has had her hand up for a little while now. So Elaine, would you like to ask a question to the panel?
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much for the discussion tonight. It's really been educational for someone who's been at it a long time and still learning. Senator Bartolotta, the bill you have for the 4-1 vote for commutation, since Governor Wolf has been governor, there's never been a 4-1 vote for pardons. And I'd like you to look at the data and suggest that you might consider changing or amending that bill to the one to match Representative McClinton's bill in the House to be a 3-2 vote. Do you have any thoughts or comments on that?
Sure, I absolutely do. And I think, and I had this conversation with Lieutenant Governor Fetterman when he first proposed it to me. Because again, there are two individuals that are on the pardons board that seem to always vote together on everything. I see some smiles, you know what I'm talking about. You know, and I call it cover, but I think, again, I think it was Representative Jones had said, look, we need to take incremental steps and move forward a little bit. I think if we go from unanimous 5-0 and say, okay, we're going to flip it right back to the majority, you know, 3-2, you know, that's where the initial knee-jerk reaction occurred. So baby steps, let's get on the field. You know, maybe we're not going to get a touchdown, but you know what? I'd love to get to the 50-yard line. So if maybe that's something that's palatable, and then make it so that we can prove to other legislators, look, we did this and the sky didn't fall. This is a good thing. So maybe then the next time we take it to a 3-2. But I would love to at least release that juggernaut that has become of the pardons board because of, you know, commuting life sentences requiring a unanimous. I mean, you can't get 5 people to agree on what they want on a pizza, you know, and these are people's lives we're talking about, and nobody wants to make a mistake. And, you know, it's just, let's try to get there a little bit at a time. So I would love to see at least a 4-1.
But I guess we could go back and forth on that, because I just think that because there's never been a 4-1, that an incremental step would be great if they actually did, but they don't vote 4-1. So what would be the positive effect overall of having a change in the vote if it's not being used?
Well, I know for sure that, yeah, after November, at least the makeup of the board, the individuals on it is going to change. So hopefully, you know, maybe we'll get someone else on that board that has a different view.
Yeah, that would be a help. I just wanted to suggest one other thing really quickly. When people asked what they could do, and someone mentioned about language, and I really think the language we use when we talk about people who are incarcerated, we need to humanize these individuals. When we call them criminals or inmates or offenders, we're labeling them in a way that creates a bias. So I just like to recommend to all of us on a daily basis to consciously look at our language and help us humanize the 38,000 men and women who are incarcerated in Pennsylvania and everywhere else. Thank you. I'm sorry I went on too long.
Good point.
Thank you, Elaine. So we are just about out of time. And I want to thank all our panelists for being here. I want to thank all our audience members for being here. I think this was a really great discussion. I hope this is the beginning of a lot of discussions. And hopefully, this was beneficial for a lot of people to hear and experience. And yeah, so I just want to thank everybody, and I want to wish everyone a lovely night.
Thank you. Have a blessed Easter.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Roxanne.
God bless
Good
you.
night.
God bless
Thank
you.
you.
Have a great holiday, a great Easter.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.